Okay. Hey, everybody, what's going on? Wow. 3 people turn out in like the first couple of seconds. I was gonna share it, but I think I did last night, and all of my posts in the last like
Stop.
2 days have been promotion posts.
Okay.
But you are getting feedback too, so you might want to
Yeah,
do something with the audio.
taking care of.
Okay. Well, yes. I don't know where we want to start with this, but let's just introduce the topic real fast.
Sure.
And yeah, so Eric, you'd written a couple of these ideas about moral inflation. You'd published it to your own Substack, and now you published it to Brutalated. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I haven't said it out loud. That's the first time I said it out loud. That's our sort of salon publication that we're doing with Casey and Esty and Rob, and probably at least one or two other people who I'm forgetting. Yeah,
I'm here.
you here? Can you hear me? This is all
Yes,
getting
I
edited
can.
out in post. Okay. So did you catch my little spiel on the front end about moral inflation?
I
And
heard the
did I
first half.
purely? All right.
I heard
Second
the
half.
first half.
Second half was basically describing, as I understood it, you're describing moral inflation and the use of these really heavy terms as less of as a moral collapse and more of a systemic problem coming from the way in which information is exchanged now. You called it moral overload in specific. Does that sound about right? Maybe
Yes,
you
it
can
does.
elaborate on that.
Yes. No, you have it. And I'm sure the elaboration will come from the discussion. And it's funny because, obviously I've known for days now that we were going to do this. And I was thinking about what should I have already set up in my head? And nothing specific came to me. I reread my own piece multiple times and I was like, okay, I don't see anything new. You know, I don't know. But here we are, the little red light says we're recording and it just all came to me right now.
I was going to say,
It's
if you've
funny
got
how that
nothing,
happens.
I've got a few launching off
Oh
points.
no,
Just
I
when
got
we were
something.
framing this argument discussion.
No, I've got something and I hadn't thought of it until right now. And that is, I was wondering, why did I write this in the first place? I was trying to think back, like, where did this idea come from? And I remember it's because, normally I'm an audio podcaster and I've podcasted with generally the same group of people for over 15 years. And, we're all long distance from each other, but we've all met each other in person multiple times. One doesn't live too far away. Whatever. I've known these people a very long time, and we were all 15 years younger when we started doing this. And so, yeah, we have history and whatnot. And it's interesting because amongst ourselves, like in our little group of podcasters and other podcasters we know who we've known for 15 years, I remember 15 years ago, like everyone was coming from different parts of the country, some from other countries. And 15 years ago, everyone just kind of got along in general, even though we all had different backgrounds, different experiences, different socioeconomic levels. Everything was just kind of like easy breezy 15 years ago. No one really brought up politics or anything. There was just like, hey, we're all great and we all get along.
Yeah.
But in the last or post 2015, things started changing in the overall dynamic of just that, like our cluster of social group, but then also like surrounding other people that we knew, by association. And the splinters started happening. It didn't happen overnight, but it started happening. And there started being friction between different personalities,
Mm,
and it started small and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it started to be like, oh, so and so doesn't want to be friends with us anymore. And now so and so doesn't want to be friends because it got to a certain point. And I'm just sitting here watching everything like, what is happening? What is happening? What's different? I mean, I know we're older, all of us, but there's got to be something else going on. And just to get to the point, because obviously this continued to happen, it's got to the point that over the last year, maybe in the last 8 to 10 months, like the people I'm closest to who we've podcasted day in, day out, week in, week out, we have like these discussions before or after we do a podcast where we're just casually talking about whatever. And it happened a couple times in the last 8-10 months where all of a sudden my really good friends are like attacking me through the microphone and
Mm.
like yelling at me. And just this is crazy. I mean, we've spoken for like 15 years, constantly, regularly, all the time. I've been to your house, like, why is this even happening? And I wasn't upset in the moment other than, okay, well, I guess I just have to stay here for 30 minutes and just like listen and go, okay. Cause I didn't get combative, which was the other thing that was interesting to me. I wasn't ever getting combative. I was just saying, like, okay, okay. But yet I was still getting yelled at or berated. And, they apologized at the end or the next day. But I was thinking about it and I was thinking in my head, how did we get here? Why is this happening? And I did that thing that is common for people to do, when you just get into an argument or something weird happens, like you reflect on it for the days after, the week after. Well, what if I would have said this? Or maybe I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
And that is literally where the idea came from because within 2 weeks of the last time that happened, I was joining Substack and I was like thinking, what am I going to write about? And I thought, well, if I can figure out why my friends are yelling at me, if I can figure out something that's going on there, I guess I could write something about that without ever mentioning them or anything like that. And so that's how it happened. And I
Yeah.
completely forgot that's how it happened, even though that happened like around New Year's or something. Must have the last time I got berated on mic by friends. And then, of course, that essay came out like 20 or so days later after that.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw it was dated like something like February. So that sounds about right. And it's funny you say that because so I didn't have it in the context of podcasting, but I do have this in the context of Substack a lot. And I I can't help myself. I really can't. But I constantly toe the line, especially in my notes and in my essays. And I like to talk about provocative things. I like to, but I try to, in the best way possible, not taking a stance on it and just couch this in a way like, hey, this is something we're observing. People have very strong opinions about it. Here's one, and here are the possible interpretations. I really do my best to just leave this neutral and to open the discussion and let people talk. Like I think it's important to talk about. I think contentious topics are the most important topics to talk about. And to the extent that these you should be looking to understand. Like I think you should be talking about things that you don't agree with or listening to these things just to gain an appreciation. I don't think like I think it's kind of this anti-echo chamber kind of ethos. I don't know if it's and I noticed that despite my best efforts, I would get a non-zero number of vitriolic responses to some of these topics just for mentioning them, let alone taking a stance on it. And this is the first time I've ever encountered that because in in my own life, I'm surrounded by people who can hold multiple things at once. And I think until I started on Substack, I didn't really realize that how deeply just mentioning something can be. And I think that that echoes a little bit the inverse of your statement, which is like people who you'd known for a while, all of a sudden, I mean, it seems like it was sudden or at least gradual, are changing the way they treat you because of I don't even and just knowing you a little bit here, I don't think you're holding strong opinions about these things, but just because of the way you interact with them, that seems like there are it seems like there is simultaneously an escalation and a lack of willingness to discuss deeply held topics. Does that make sense? I don't want to lose the thread here too much.
Yes. No, yes. But let me just make it simple for you and everyone
Yeah,
else
yeah.
in these
We're
particular
not,
cases.
yes.
Because
Summarize what I said to me
it's not
because
like,
I need it.
no, I'm not going to summarize what you said. I'm going to tell you what actually happened. Because obviously, since I've known these people for so long, we've discussed sensitive topics before, and so it's not like this is a new thing. And yes, I've always cast myself similarly to how you said you did yourself on Substack, where you just put it out there and just see what happens. You don't necessarily like carry a flag for any particular position. And I've always been the same way in real life as well as I guess online. Except online, I usually never mention anything anyway. But in real life, I will just bring something up and just let it be there. And so we've discussed many things before and had normal conversations. So what was different, other than the political landscape surrounding us, because eventually when this friend or that friend apologized to me, oftentimes the next day, it was just like a similar thing. I mean, a similar type of cause or reason that this happened. You know, it didn't necessarily have anything to do with me personally, but the person had seen someone give a certain speech or a certain news story was really big that same day, earlier in the day before we were speaking on microphone. And they were so angry by that thing. And they had been like on their own social media going, oh, just like opining and complaining about it. And they were just like so bothered by whatever that news or whatever that speech was that just took place. And then later in the day, they're talking to me. We're talking about other things. And then something reminds them about what was in the news today. Or I say something that unintentionally like triggers that what they were thinking about earlier that day. And then it's like, boom, then it comes out. Not to mention there could be other substances in their system at the same time because we're podcasting at night, which,
Yes.
maybe that like takes the inhibitors off and just like, let's go. And let me just say everything. And so that was kind of a common thread in these instances where something happened earlier in the day because of regular national news or whatever, national coverage. They're fine. We're just having a conversation. I say something that reminds them of something, and boom, then here we go. And then, so these things wouldn't just happen randomly. It's not like, I'm just talking about going to the park and all of a sudden they're yelling at me about like presidential politics. Nothing like that. There was something like already planted in their head, and I accidentally set off something that wasn't resolved in them yet in that particular day.
Yeah. I think you're entirely right there. And I think it's more of like the gun is loaded and it's sort of on a hairpin. I don't, and maybe we can spitball some theories here, but I think that this is serving some internal purpose. Like, I think that a lot of the vitriol is coming out for a reason. Like, I think that if you have like a speech occurring and somebody stirs up some, I don't even want like a sense of urgency or a crisis, and now you are in sort of this high tension state. I don't know what is, there's got to be something cathartic perhaps about just blowing
Yes.
up on the
Of
next person you
course.
see.
Of course. Now, luckily, we have this long essay to look at to how this even happens in the first place.
Yes.
And not just the person who is feeling like the vitriol build. It's affecting the entire landscape because it's affecting why the news is reporting things the way they are. And then when the news is doing it to a large extent, then even the person who's under the spotlight will adjust their messaging because they know that's there. You see, there's like multiple, not just one, but there's multiple feedback loops happening already in the world. And it's just like setting the stage and everything is relatively calm, meaning news, the public speakers, but this feedback loop is like elevating or inflating all parties. And so that's why it's not just one speech that just happens one day and everyone's just like, what did he say? No, it like slowly builds through multiple speeches and multiple news reports and multiple happenings. And then everyone at home along the way, being on whatever social media or at their workplace, talking about it, and all of these things are inflating. And then that's where you have things ready to go. And that's when you've like set the table, and that now it is cathartic because this person has been carrying this tension. They don't like it. They haven't been able to resolve it. They've been opining on social media as loudly as they can, and it's still not giving them closure or relief. And so it's still there inside of them. And now you're just chatting to a friend and they bring something up. It's been triggered. It's not like they're trying to make me feel bad or insult me, but here's someone I trust. And they're not thinking this consciously. I'm like reading below the surface. This person I trust, they're smart, you know each other. Well, now I can literally say the thing and put it all out there. It's not just me typing into the cosmos and like arguing with bots. This is a real person. Yes, I think, and just like these kind of issues need a release valve socially or what as societally, the individual needs it just as much. And so yes, I really think that is part of it, is it being a release valve mechanism because it has to go somewhere.
So, yeah, I mean, do you think that, because I think what you're getting at a little bit too is the escalation you referenced in the article about how there's no forgetting mechanism on the internet for these high tension discussion and polarizing discussions. So I think that over the first opinion that lands is the stickiest, and the news moves faster than our ability to close those open loops. I think that is part of it, and the lack of release valves is maybe the other. Like, I'm almost wondering to what extent the lack of this might. I don't. I think it relates to, but is not directly caused by things like the collapse of social life in the internet era without people having real voices nearby. But I think that's part of it. But there's definitely some compulsion to have an immediate reaction, and then to there needs to be some mechanism for that to die down. And I think when you have with certain people, they have a disposition such that they very quickly diffuse the emotions. Like, I think as a person, I almost think like I metabolize emotions pretty fast. So I don't think that I personally am very, very prone to extreme opinions in the face of news. But that's because I'm just internally able to to diffuse a lot of those emotions, and I don't think that that's the case for most people. I think most people need some external outlet for that, or they need to just have enough time to literally just forget a little bit of the intensity. And without that in our current environment, there's like, what outlets do you even see for us to close some of those loops and release some of that tension over time? Like, it used to just be slowness of information and actual forgetting. And now it doesn't seem like there's any opposing force. Like, do you foresee a world in which it technology allows information to still move this fast and still let us metabolize a lot of these quick, like, strong emotions quickly, or at least these news pieces? Like, is it just a sense of education, discernment? Like, how do we how do we even begin to tackle that? Like, I think certain people have the disposition for it, but most people certainly don't. Most
So what you just asked, there's part of it that's relatively simple that I can address. And then there's also part of it that is so unknowable, like what the
Yeah.
answer is. So let me tackle the possible part or the possibilities, because now I have never been some type of life guru type person
You don't need a license.
apparently, but I have a different kind of license, which maybe I'll talk about more now or maybe another time, about where do these ideas come from? They come from me observing nature in the wild. Like, picture me on the savannas, living my entire life, observing these animals in their natural habitat, except my savanna is this country around me and everything I see through the internet rectangle, and the animals that I'm observing are my own species. That may sound poetic, but it's actually much more accurate than I meant for it to sound because of life and work experience. But anyway, okay. So the simplest answer, and I'm not saying it's the only answer, but the simplest answer for an individual or for multiple individuals is to get more engaged with anything that is outside of your domicile out in the world. Like, literally anything. And not necessarily your specific job, depending on what it is. But I mean, you need to get out and you need to do anything, whether it is take long walks in the park, whether it's take some classes on learning how to paint, whether it is volunteering to pick up garbage at some community space, anything that involves, oh, you have to like talk to this person who you may not know, but anything you can possibly think of outside of your domicile that isn't necessarily communication over the internet, meaning it has to be some sort of face to face, anything, get involved in it, because that will quickly drown out everything else that we're being bombarded with that is not happening within 1 mile of where we are. Like, think of all the things that come through the internet or other avenues that are happening at least 50 miles away from you, whatever they are, but that are constantly being fed to you, that you're constantly thinking about, that are constantly bothering you, whatever the case. If you start doing anything where you are with the people around you in your community, your city, whatever, that will really start to drown out what's coming from the outside. And then you'll have a chance to like lower the temperature on a personal level. And that's the simplest answer. I don't think it's the only answer, but it's the simplest answer. And here's the funny thing, because now I'm thinking about it. So, you know, this phenomenon, it affects a lot of my friends, not just the close ones I podcast with, but also extended friends throughout that network of people who are in different states, different countries, all over the place. And most of them are saying the same kind of thing, which is it, like, their friends in real life feel the same way about these things, whatever the issues are that they do. And all their friends and close family are having like the same internal struggles they are having. That's what they say. And this is the thing I've also always noticed, that for some reason, most of my long associations and friends on the internet, they say all their other friends are feeling the same as them. Like, let's just take a simple, well, I don't know if it's simple, but like COVID times.
Mm.
All my friends, this is horrible. This sucks. I'm so down. I'm stuck in the house, and everyone I know, I can't see my family. And everyone's saying this, like, across the country, all over the place, all these friends I know. But where I was at the time, in like a small town in the middle of nowhere, Texas, at the time when COVID was reaching its initial like first peak, when it was everywhere and all the talk all the time and everyone was under lockdown. I was in a small town, like population, like 4,000 or something in the middle of nowhere, Texas. And I would go out and I would go to the store and everything was completely normal. Everything was completely normal. Everybody was fine. Everybody was doing normal activities in that small town. Nobody was locked up. Nobody was in. Stores were open. Restaurants were open. People went to work. Everything was completely normal for the most part. And everybody was fine. And then I go on the internet and all my friends living in bigger cities or other places around the world, this is the worst. I can't do it, stuck inside. And I'm just like, okay. It's almost like what was coming in from the outside world to the internet to me, from my perspective, was the real world is science fiction. Because as soon as I go out, everything is so normal. People are walking their dogs, people are shaking their hands. In the community where I lived, nobody anywhere was wearing a mask. There was no mandate anywhere. There was no nothing. And everything was normal. Yes, some people were being ill and they were staying at home. And yes, so it's not like people weren't catching COVID where I was. Yes, people did, but everyone else just lived a normal life. And for how many months I heard all my friends like dying in their captivity. And I kept telling them like, yeah, my life has not changed around me, is the same. I see the news, everything's different everywhere else. Everything's totally normal. And not only that, a lot of my friends, of course, had to stay home because they couldn't go to work for long periods of time. But I had an essential job. So I had to go to work no matter what. And I was going to work every single day. And I was around hundreds of people on a daily basis. And this is before there was any vaccination that existed. None of us were getting sick. Okay. Maybe someone back at their house was getting sick, but nobody at work was getting sick. And we were showing up every day around hundreds of people. And I still had my job. So that's another reason why I didn't get antsy, because I still had to work hard every day. I still came home exhausted every day. And the community around me was normal. So what's going on? How come everybody I knew who lived in a city or was somewhere else in the world was like going through all the troubles that apparently everybody went through? And I would just look outside and everything completely normal. And that's the only thing I can think of, is that everybody was still living their normal life. Even if someone got sick in one particular family and had COVID and stayed home, everybody else would still go out in that family, would go out and just live their regular life. So
let's linger on this COVID thing, because I think this is this is going to get us canceled. This is going nowhere. But zero shares, silent ban. But I do think you're right, because this is the extreme version of exactly this phenomenon that we're. It's this inversion of what happens when people's internal narrative about what is happening in the world at a large scale, like just their interpretation of what's happening, is overriding their ability to perceive the things that are happening in their lives in real life around them. And what's so pernicious is that the speed of news and the way in which it's so inflammatory and doesn't give us time, and with the fact that we don't allow ourselves to, and the fact that it drives us away from the people who are around us, it actively drives up barriers such that, like what happened with your friend in the podcasting, is you are you are changing your opinions about people around you based on things that you are not observing directly, but that you are intuiting from something that somebody else told you understand. And this is a really, and so it very counterintuitively, the thing you need to counter this, the speed of information and the inflammatory nature of information, and to give yourself a way to close those open loops and allow yourself to return to baseline, are the people around you. And at the same time, you are doing you are being driven, and perhaps maybe allowing yourself to be driven to an extent, to cut those things out of your life which are most beneficial for you returning to emotional regularity. And this mirrors a lot. and this now brings some other examples to my mind. Here's a really quick one. Was for a long time in a completely separate realm, there was this idea, and this still floats around, but in the world of strength sport, like it is this idea that, for example, carbohydrates make you fat, and these things are cyclic, and specifically and causatively, and it is not, and so you would have some people who are out espousing this idea that, we need to only eat proteins and fats. And if I want to make weight for competition, this is what you should do. And then they would be going up to people like in gyms who were perhaps stronger than them or leaner than them and offering prescriptions like, you know what, dude, you really need to cut out the carbohydrates from your diet because they're making you fat. And when in reality, like the guy in front of you is maybe like demonstrably stronger and leaner. So at the very least, it's not holding them back. And you see this like big mismatch of the thing that you think that you are empirically observing is overridden by this kind of narrative you have in your head that was fed to you from the outside. And that's like a very trite example, but that is a mirror of exact. I think that happens in so many realms. The social was something that we all came up to and came in contact with during, and the loss, we drove away our own release valve and ignored the empirical reality in favor of narrative, which really shows how unevolved our little monkey brains are. And it's very, and cannot, or maybe this is something to get into next, is cannot or are unwilling or something about that messaging makes it very sticky. Like if we saw what happened with the whole drama surrounding Dr. Fauci and the inability for humans to update their existing knowledge base as more information became available amidst mixed messaging from kind of these talking heads of the community. And I think this is something that SD and I sort of touched at one point as well, was this idea that that we have, what we observe needs to, yeah, I don't want to get too deep into it, but I think like just the inability for us to update our existing beliefs as well. And the usurping of empirical reality. I don't know. Like, does that, what's speaking to you there?
I only have 10,000 things to say about what you just said. Only 10,000.
Only 10,000. Let's knock that down to 9,999. What's
Let
number
me see
one?
if I can speed through this because normally I try to jot things down on a pad or paper, but hold on to the biggest ones. Okay, just said because I'm going to ask for like a reminder because I'm going to forget some of these points.
All right.
Okay. First
I've
off,
got paper too. So,
I had an idea for another day, which is,
okay.
how do all these ideas and anything that we describe as going viral nowadays, you know, anything, whether it's a YouTube video or whatever that goes viral, a meme that goes viral. Obviously, whatever goes viral in our modern time, etc. And I was thinking, before the internet, what kinds of things would go viral? And in large part, only actual viruses, biological ones, and
Yeah.
they would go viral. And there wasn't such a thing as pandemics, obviously, since long ago. But the other irony of those viral pandemics of long ago is they only spread with human contact, which is kind of ironic because there's no other way they could have spread. There had to be human contact. And even though, another conversation for another day, is there were things like memes that did exist before the internet that were sort of like spoken memes because a bit older than you, like you could grow up on the East Coast and know some kind of weird rhyme that came up where you grew up and where you went to school. And then 20 years later, you'll meet someone who grew up in Oregon And somehow they had like the exact same story, or they knew that weird tale. And you'd be like, how could you know that in Oregon, like at that time? Because how could that have gotten from here to there? So there
Yeah, I
was
know what
such a
you
thing.
mean.
Yeah, there was such a thing as verbal memes and actual viruses before, but you actually had to have human contact, because there's no way you could get from the East Coast to Oregon without people telling each other. And so it's ironic. That's the only way things could go viral before, is there had to be human contact. And now it's completely flipped, because now things most often go viral when there's not actual human contact. It gets dispersed quicker. Okay. And then I was also thinking about, you know, a type of mental inoculation I had when COVID was just starting to happen, when we were all just starting to learn about it. And what it was the year before COVID happened, there was a typical, I mean, relatively common flu outbreak that was happening. And I said I worked around hundreds of people on a daily basis. And I did, a year before COVID happened. And when that flu outbreak happens, I'm going to work surrounded by hundreds of people. We lost at least 2 or 3 employees who lost their life because they picked up the flu during that outbreak.
Mhm.
Okay. It is what it is. It happens. We lost 3 coworkers to flu during the flu outbreak. No idea if they caught it at work or caught it at home. Don't know, but they're no longer with us. So then COVID happened and everyone's talking about it. It's blowing up. All the restrictions are happening. I'm still going to work every day, encountering hundreds of people. All my friends are freaking out and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. You have to go to work. Oh, that sucks. And I go, yeah, but I'm not worried about it. And really knew anything about COVID at all. And I said, this is why, because last 3 of my coworkers died. This year, right now, COVID, so far it's 0. So when it gets up to 3 deaths, then I'm going to start looking at it differently. But I'm not even going to look at it differently than the flu outbreak that happened a year ago, because that happened and none of us were freaking out. And we literally lost 3 coworkers. We're at 0 right now. We've lost 0. And then people started catching COVID at work and they'd have to stay home. Again, 0, 0, 0. And so I consciously decided I'm not going to start elevating anything I'm thinking about this. I don't care what anything is saying on the news. I don't care what anyone else is saying, until I lose 3 coworkers due to this specific thing, which, by the way, never happened. I may have lost 1 or 2, but it was no worse than when we had that flu outbreak a year prior.
Yeah.
So that was my own personal inoculation. But I am probably something like you, where I can see that and I could literally block out everything else that is coming at me, telling me otherwise. So there's that. Now, you said something else. Okay, this is where you remind me, because that was just the beginning of what I want to say. And you were talking about the strength training. And then what else did you say after that?
Yeah, I was saying that people are able to ignore their lived reality in favor of in favor of narrative, and I had also mentioned the inability for people to update prior beliefs. Does that ring any bells? Or beyond?
Yes. Yes. Because it still takes a certain kind of resilience and deliberate choice, because we all know that you can get gaslit by an individual or multiple individuals.
Mhm.
But what happens when the gaslighting is coming from almost everywhere? It's the
So
person in the cubicle next to you. It's the news. If you actually pick up a physical newspaper, you're like, oh my gosh, it's there too. And it's on YouTube. It's all over your TikTok. It's all over your
yeah,
Instagram. And if they're all coming from the same voice, I mean, that's like gaslighting on a whole. That's viral gaslighting,
yeah,
unintentional. It's like organic viral gaslight. Oh, now it's the second part of what I wanted to say, because you were
okay.
talking about Fauci, and the interesting thing about Fauci, and I've thought about this from a distance, but a lot of people don't know about him in the 1980s, because in the 1980s, there was a different virus that was going around killing a lot of people. And it was originally called GRIDS, which was an acronym, and it had other names early on, but eventually it became known as HIV, etc. And that was obviously a huge thing in the 80s and going into the early 90s. And obviously everybody knew about it. And, there was constant public awareness and all kinds of stuff, television commercials trying to explain what HIV or AIDS is and this and that. There was the big Live Aid concert that happened in the 80s with Queen and everybody else. It was such a huge thing. And guess who was in charge from the American perspective on all this messaging and getting the word out and trying to keep people safe from HIV? Dr. Fauci was.
Yeah.
He was the guy. And once we got past the AIDS pandemic or whatever, I don't even know if that's an accurate way to describe it. But once we got past that, it was like, wow, Dr. Fauci, like you were essential to get us through that, to get us through the 80s, to get, public awareness out, yada, yada, yada. You were very effective. So guess who position and the right person to call when COVID comes around? You go, well, hey, he was our guy. He was our all-star in the 80s with that other thing. Let's put him on this. And now this is the part where I start to get into conjecture and theorizing because I don't have evidence. I'm just kind of like playing with it in my mind.
Yeah.
I'm guessing he largely followed the same principles during COVID times as he did during the 1980s. Obviously thinking it worked before, it should work again. But I think the difference is that we didn't have instant news, 24-hour news cycle, internet, social media. That didn't exist in the 80s, obviously. And so in the 80s, I can see that you're going to want to blast the message because it has to go viral in the verbal way, which I talked about earlier. How are we going to get the word out to people who live like outside of the city? Like there's people who literally only got one television channel if they were lucky where they lived in the 80s. So how are they going to know? So they would have to blast it out. They'd have to make these crazy commercials because there's no way to penetrate the actual, like everyone.
Yeah.
But what happens if you apply that in a modern ecosystem where that is not at all the case? If we go to biology, if you're trying to inoculate a certain organism in a certain ecosystem, then obviously you have to really get it out if you're like physically trying to get it to every creature. But if you can just aerolize it, aerosol, if you just make it airborne, then you can just hit the whole community at once. Well, the internet has become airborne for spreading these types of thought viruses.
I think let me try to systematize this a little bit because I think this is really tying back into some ideas that I recently also had but like this reminds me, like when you look at classical theory of knowledge or theory of like, how do we know what, and I think like there are 5 major ways in which we kind of acquire information. So you can like perceive it with your own senses. You can see it and touch it and feel it. You can recall it from a past instance. You can infer it or derive it like rationally. You can hear about it from other people, or you can actually I'm sorry, I might have I think those are the major ones actually. I think it's 4. And think that depending on the domain, not all of those are equal in quality. And I don't think people necessarily understand the idea of evidence quality very well. I would say that for systems that are hard to understand directly, which are, I think, most things that are in society and biology, I would say there are a few exceptions to this, like kinematic motion can be described almost perfectly at not the speed by a handful of equations that we have derived rationally. But I think for most things, the hierarchy goes something like perception, then reason, then hearsay. And if you look at it in science, even there's an entire, they call it the evidence hierarchy, and it's a little bit more, but it's like without getting too deep into the science, like when I say science, I mean just mean like the scientific process, like, observe, research, hypothesis, react, iterate, whatever. But and then I think what the so on an individual level, like this is often forget people often conflate quantity with quality. So if you have hearsay from 1,000 different people, you are more likely to rank that above like a single high quality perception in your own life. I think that's part of it because I don't think people are prioritizing these things very well, and that plays into something called having to do with trust, which is a huge part of communication is trust. And I think some people have gotten to the and trust is established in a number of ways, and one of those is social proof. And the internet has allowed social proof to and maybe not just the internet, but I think that there is an amount of social proof and an amount of trust that you can have that will make people override their empirical observations with hearsay. And I that can be a feature and it can be a bug. Because I think
Yeah.
in a good sense, communication is properly couched relaying of empirical realities that you did not directly observe. If if I trust a scientist to communicate research on germ theory, I can trust that germs exist even though I have not perceived them because I trust the communication channel, like the scientist, that he is communicating his empirical reality to me that has elevated his hearsay from this to the level of perception. So that channel has been preserved. Like I think good communication really preserves the quality of the source of their original information. Like I think that's essentially what the job of good communication is. And poor communication either understates or overstates the quality of the original source. And if you find out later on that that no longer aligns with the reality, you lose trust. But it's very, in a world where we're not validating a lot of these things, hearsay and the amount of people saying something to you can very quickly usurp the actual quality things they're saying to you. And so maybe if I had to frame it perception, like like in one way is the information that other people like perception is perhaps king, but perception as relayed to you by other people is mediated by the trust you have in the communication channel. And that's going to be that's my working, but I think that explains a lot of what we're seeing with tying that back into like COVID, for example, is that we trusted the sources of information so deeply that we allowed that to override what we were observing in our everyday lives without taking and questioning these uh, we without taking and questioning the things that were to us and taking them a little bit too much at face value. I think
Yes.
that's my theory.
Yes. And let me advance it further or expand
Please.
upon. Okay. Oh boy. So
Yeah.
as I was listening to you and thinking through this, I'm trying to think of the easiest way to share this. See, this is why I write essays, because it's hard to make it consumable just like
Yeah.
this. But
I
here I
think
go.
yeah, go ahead.
So I don't have the ability to check for all proper phenomenon names that I'm about to get into, but I know it starts with something like the show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And you know how there's those different assists you can have when you get stuck on a question. And I believe the assist that is most reliable from that show running its iterations is ask the audience. And you just have, there's like a poll of all the audience and they choose what they think is the best answer. And I believe it's the most reliable assist you can use out of your options. Like statistically, besides phone a friend or whatever, it's just ask the audience. They're the ones who consistently are most likely to deliver the correct answer in the show. And that's not just something that happens on the game show. That is something that happens all over the place. It happens with betting. It happens if you're into like betting or online betting, and you know how they adjust the spread based on, everyone's putting money on this person, this and that. And they do this now for political elections, everything. And the group think is so often right, and that's why the spread works. That's why betting, people who host betting, the way they stay in business is just by following the math. Because statistically, it's 80% of people are saying this boxer is going to win. Most likely that's what's going to happen. Now there are anomalies, but it's accounted for because 9 times out of 10, whatever the audience leans towards is going to happen, and they adjust the spread accordingly. Okay. So you can look up tons of stuff about where you can just ask a bunch of people, a large sample group of people, whatever kind of question you want, and they're largely going to come up with the correct answer as a whole. So if this is true, then it makes sense. Shift over to thinking about evolution. It makes sense. If this is such a reliable source of truth in our real nature as humans and our surroundings, if this is a phenomenon that's real, then it's always been a thing since there's been Homo sapiens, which it would be advantageous in evolution to have a proclivity to listen to the group think. So it would make sense that a lot of everyday humans just go, yeah, even if they don't even know why. Like statistically, we can show them because statistically, you're on the right side of things. But they don't even have to understand that because this is something that just happens naturally. Okay, so it makes sense that most people will be inclined that if 100 of their friends are saying something, then even if they can't figure it out, their own biology is going to be telling them, yeah, that's probably it. And even if you have your own thought, but wait a second, I saw something yesterday. Look, your 100 friends are, okay, they're probably right. You're probably wrong. So it makes sense we evolve that way. Now, this ties into a paper I wrote a while back where I started talking about herd mentality. And, in short, obviously, if you corral a bunch of bison or something and they're programmed to just follow what the other one in front of them is doing and the one behind follows, and you can get them all to run off a cliff or like lemmings or something. And so who could possibly survive amongst that herd? The oddballs who didn't get the right programming that said, just stay in the herd. And of course it makes sense because evolutionary, that's how you have the best chance to survive. If you all move together like a herd, the one that goes off is going to get picked off. But if everyone's going off a cliff, the only one that's not going to go off the cliff is the one that is already going off anyway. So in most times, it's not advantageous for that person to be doing their own thing, except for the one time when everyone goes off a cliff. So this was a very reliable source of information before, or probably all of human time, to just, odds are, if you go with the group think, you're going to be good. But that's because we did not evolve alongside internet and instant communication, traveling hundreds of miles instantaneously. None of that was baked in. So now someone has introduced a cliff, because how do you simulate getting a herd to go off a cliff? You simulate, you are predators, you surround them, you leave them one opening, they're going to go that way, they go off the cliff. So I'm not saying anyone did this on purpose, but with communication being the way it is now, so instantaneous, like it is very easy to unintentionally corral humans mentally to be set off to go off a cliff because it happens too fast. It happens too fast. Before instant communication, internet, etc., picture the herd is just walking and they're all following each other, but they're walking. And then the ones in the front go, holy crap, there's a cliff. And maybe one other one in the front wasn't paying attention and goes off, but everyone's just going walking and they're just like, whoa, hold on, stop. Maybe one more guy goes off because he was texting on his phone, which doesn't make sense. But then they're like, hold on, everybody stop. And a few go over the edge, but then it's like, okay, turn around. We're not going this way because they were walking or just
Like the walk, don't run thing. They don't run out of a movie theater that's burning you down.
But if you're running, how do you stop it? How do you stop it? You're at the front. You're like, oh crap, they're all going up the edge. You are even trying to stop, but the man behind you is still pushing. Okay, I hope that makes sense. But what I was really talking about is statistically, groupthink is correct so often, and it was evolved to be that way. But conditions have changed in the real world where communication can spread so much more quickly, so much more farther, and affect such larger groups of people instantaneously that now it's too fast. And so now we can get unreliable results from the groupthink. And we were never designed collectively to encounter that. But there are some of us now where it would have been perhaps disadvantageous to, in the past, where it was like, let's go, the flood is coming. You're like, well, wait a second. Is the flood really going to collect here or is it going to go down? And they're like, we're gone. And you're like, hold on. And then you drown. See, not the best evolutionary to be the heavy thinker in olden times. But now, because everyone's going off a cliff at such high speed, now it has become, so it went from a bug to a feature is what I've been trying to say this whole time. That it may have been a bug to not believe the groupthink before, and you would have spin the town crazy. But now, when the town is lighting itself on fire, the town crazy, even if he is crazy, is still going to be the only one left alive. Because everyone else is lighting their house on fire. He's just like, I don't know what's happening, but yet he's alive at the end of the day.
There's other accelerants to that as well. Like the reason that the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, like the best hint was crowdsourcing, was because the crowd was a relatively diverse group of people with multiple different sources of information. And now you're really not interacting with more people than you used to. Like you were just interacting with the people who are living farther away. But I don't think I interacted more than I did with like people before. Just they're farther now, and they're probably more self-selected. So like they're coming from a more narrow band.
That is perfect. Because that is perfect what you just said. Let me just say, because if you ask the audience, yes, you're exposed to a larger, more diverse group than what you're usually encounter in your daily life, or even if your own family, like if you saw a family member or something. But what happens if the crowd that day for the show is everyone from Lawrence Middle School down the
or a group of nuns from the same cloister or something? Yeah.
Exactly. Pick whatever demo you want. If they're all the same, things are not going to go the same when you ask the audience. And that's the key right there. That is the key. And algorithms and social media and electronic communication are geared towards cloistering us. So that is another piece of the puzzle. Because it's not like everyone is just freewheeling randomly. We are set to cluster. And perhaps that's why in the past, Twitter was a very different landscape when it was brand new on the scene. And perhaps that's also why platforms like WordPress and Blogster or whatever never really caught on the way something like Substack has, because there was the lack of cloistering. So Twitter was like the Wild West, and not necessarily in a bad way in its early days, because it didn't cloister you. It didn't like feed you a specific algorithm. It was more like Omegle or something. Like, who's this person? I don't know. Who's this person? And so you were like, there wasn't like this echo chamber effect, because it was more like Omegle or Meagle. And that's what Twitter was like. You had no idea who you were going to see. And just because you like this or like that, it didn't mean you were going to get more of that. You would still get like the roulette wheel constantly. And then WordPress or those old blog sites, yes, you could post, but there wasn't an algorithm that was like connecting you with other people who like wrote the same or read the same. So you just kind of just sat there and randomize would come and go, oh, okay. And then maybe you get lucky one day and so go, oh, I like that. But it wouldn't feed an algorithm. It was still just everything. So even though the internet existed and social media was starting up, it was still slow. It was still walking. And that may not have been good if you're a writer on WordPress, but on Twitter, it made it so fun because actually, now that I think about it, Twitter was like Omegle in text form in its early days, because you just never knew who you're going to meet or what you're going to read. So,
And and I don't think people, Este's saying here, is actually triggering something in me here, because I don't think people realize that they, like, the weird thing about echo chambers is that people don't realize they're being driven where everybody agrees with them, because a lot of the framing is around like, we are the like the counterculture, the quasi counterculture framing is huge in a lot of these circles. I think in just about every circle, like I think every echo, not even just every echo chamber, every corner internet thinks it's the counterculture. Like everybody is the counterculture now. And so I don't think people realize you can't just look around you and see everybody running off the cliff. Like it's all in a lot of ways you have blinders on as well. And yeah,
no. This reminds me of back in the late aughts, early tens or whatever, when the word hipster came to mean a particular thing. It started to become a certain type of thing started. It's become this like weird countercultural movement circa 2008, 2009 timeframe. And then it went like headstrong as this like hipster met a particular thing in this country into the early tens. And for a while, and the hipster phenomenon was just the latest iteration of that thing that has always happened before and will always happen again. And now is happening in a way you described now on the social media landscape. And the thing about hipsters was like, we're so cool because we're different and we're selective and we don't take anything that's like mainstream or obvious. We find these little things and we like have our little communities and we just enjoy them amongst ourselves, like a secret society. And I remember this when this started and I was like, but then what happened with the hipster thing in its early days is it started catching on and more people wanted to join this like hipster thing to the point where I would go to Austin, Texas and go, oh my God, everyone's like a hipster. And like they all dress the same. They all read the same books. They all watch the same like art house films. And I'm like, wait a second. I thought the thing was we don't like what's mainstream. Amongst you guys, I must be the true hipster because I'm not into any of this. I'm a person who's not dressed by the dress code, which no one decided on, but everyone just adopted anyway. And that was the irony I figured out back then. But it's the irony that happens with every type of idea, every type of counterculture. It always happens eventually. It doesn't matter if you're talking about music, film, whatever. It starts as the counterculture becomes the culture, and then eventually eats itself, dies out, etc. Entropy ensues.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's eating itself anymore though. Like I think that, and in a way,
No,
they are
it's
all
just
countercultures, because the internet has allowed us to fracture into these tiny, tiny little things. And every corner of the internet is not particularly big. Even the big corners of the internet aren't that big. And that's why, like, even like famous internet's YouTubers and streamers are relatively small compared to like The Rock, because the internet is just so fractured.
yes. This reminds me of some meme I saw the other day. Not a okay. So, like you said, like it's like the counterculture just won't die. It keeps countering while not really changing. And this reminds me of this thing I saw the other day, which I had never thought about. And it showed like a map of the UK or the British Isles. And it showed how, if you had rulers that were 100 kilometers long, you could put them around the coastline of the British Isles. and you could calculate the length of those 100-meter rulers, and you would get this number. But now what happens if you use 50-meter rulers and go all around? All of a sudden, if you add up all those ruler lengths, the number is enormously bigger, meaning we're trying to calculate what's the distance to walk around the coast of the country, the perimeter. And if you use even smaller rulers and line them up all around, and you can go forever, because if you keep shrinking the ruler, you can fit more, you can tally them all up, and your total perimeter figure will keep growing, and it will grow infinite. There's no stop, because if you get to micron length rulers and put them all side by side and add them up, you're going to get this like astronomical, like incredible number of miles that it would take. But the problem is, even though you can infinitely measure a longer coastline, it's never going to change how long it takes you to actually walk around the coast. That is a fixed scale, no matter what. But mathematically, you can keep making it larger. My point is, because the countercultures keep fracturing smaller and splintering and splintering and splintering and splintering, it seems like it has infinite growth, even though it's kind of, it's a fucking their mind palace. It's not necessarily real, but that's how it's able to sustain itself, is what I'm trying to say. Because as soon as it starts losing heat, so to speak, the movement, then you just splinter it, and then you get to start all over again. And we get to start all over it. And it's a way for it to keep perpetuating without dying down.
And let me tie this back to like 7 topics ago, because like now what this is really is a salve for the open loops that we're hearing in a lot of, you know what a great way to like not feel triggered by things like the news is to just like sequester yourself and never come into contact with anybody who disagrees with you, into your little counterculture on the internet, and you feel like you guys are the only ones that understand anything. And in a way that forces you, that conforms to and salves the high stress that's imposed by things like opinionated news and high and crisis situations that are being told to us. And but the formation of a lot of these, I mean, some of them are truly niche communities, like the people who are on like the subreddit for like basket, like speed weaving or something like that, I'm sure is just truly a just interesting niche. But subreddit for like, I don't know, like online liberals who disagree with like a specific topic here, and then like I think that it's not just this, like, as opposed to just going outside and like meeting people like who might have, like you were saying earlier, spending time with people around you and coming in contact a little bit more empirical reality. The other alternative is to just make sure you never come in contact with anything that inflames that I don't want to say wound that's been inflicted on you, but a little bit like this sore spot that has been instigated by either like inflammatory media posts or people you don't like. And this kind of, I think that only feeds into this morality warfare and this in-group out-group thinking. And so the fracturing is, I don't want to say a symptom of it, but it is a nice byproduct and do I want to say maladaptive? I don't think it is a coping mechanism though. And that those two things aren't unrelated.
It's a coping because environments, I'm speaking collectively as like a species. Who am I? But anyway, collectively speaking, all adapted for a certain type of environment. And when I say environment, I mean in all the ways, not just the climate, but the social environment, and then what was possible in terms of public speaking. I mean, remember, you could only talk to as large a crowd as you could yell at, essentially. And we were evolved for that. And through evolution, we were fine-tuned for our total, everything included. And everything had so dramatically quickly. And yes, there were other obvious technological advances that happened, since the Renaissance or something. and there was major discoveries, but they were still slow enough that we slowly adapt, take in the new ideas. Smart people think about it in universities, trickle down to salons, and eventually we have print. And and so it could go through like filter, even as new technologies were emerging, there was still a process that it would go through, like a natural aquifer. But communication has sped up so incredibly quickly in such a short time. We are circumventing the whole natural aquifer, and we're making a direct line that goes straight from the source to the output.
Mm.
And nobody mentally was ever designed to handle that. And not only that, in my metaphor of making a way to circumvent the aquifer, the natural filter, but the nature of the beast, meaning we just made this side route. The nature of the beast is the more passes through it, the wider it gets. So it even gets bigger, you know,
Yeah.
the problem actually compounds. And that's kind of what I think is happening. And it's hard to fault people for falling into echo chambers because again, a lot of people are literally following their instincts that kept their ancestors alive to get to now.
Yeah. And something, and there's a bit of a weird kind of contradiction within that too, because Esty said something here too. Is like, why do people simultaneously want to follow the things the people around them are saying, and at the same time, everybody wants to feel part of the counterculture? And so I think that everybody wants to be accepted around them, but they want their group to feel somehow special. And I think that's how you marry those two ideas. And so so you don't feel like echo chamber and progressive thinkers and are very dangerously close to each other in truth. Like there's little difference somebody who is ahead of their time and somebody who is pattern of thought. And the only difference is like the only way you could tell is 10 years down the line. Not always. Like I think there are certain types of echo chambers that are resisting, but they think they're 10 years ahead of the curve. So who knows? So you're there's an interplay there is that there are people who think they are the people who are doing the thing that you're describing and following their instincts that kept their ancestors alive and relying on groupthink to outsource their belief systems also simultaneously believe that they are thinking for themselves. And the line between those two things is rather thin, and it's perhaps just where do you get your information? And having a little bit of context and humility for that when you're evaluating your own sources of information. But in truth, those
Yes,
things are dangerously close.
they are. And, this is why when I do have these kind of discussions in real life, friends are not with friends. And I just say some things like what I just said to you. And then of course I'm instantly met, how would you possibly know that? Or where are you getting that from? Of course I've experienced that a million times. And hold on. I just lost my
Yeah.
thread. What was the very last thing you just said?
About the line between counterculture and forward thinking is just the difference between where do you get your information.
Yes. Yes. So, I don't get trusted because I'm just one voice and they think I'm doing the same exact thing. Oh, you're just in your own beliefs, but you don't know this. So like we've just like canceled each other out, even though I have an argument and they don't. But anyway, yes, trying to remember my second part.
I think maybe to stir the thought a little bit too is the ability to adapt to your thought process and to look at various sources of information might
Yes,
separate
got
you.
it. So I have always been a skeptic by nature before I knew what the word skeptic was or meant. I have always, earliest memories, I couldn't just believe like anything that anyone told me, no matter who they were, no matter how much older than me they were. I would always be like, is that really how that works? Is that really how that works? And a lot of times, especially when I was young, that is really how it worked. But I needed them to like explain because I don't trust this. You know, just because I see the magic trick doesn't mean I believe in magic. Like I need to know what's going on here. So I've always been that way for whatever reason. And I've never stopped being that way. And not only am I that way with people around me telling me things, I am that way with myself all the time. And
Mm,
people do not understand how much I am
with
that
myself,
way
yes. Yeah.
all the time. I'm always like, oh boy, I really think this is this because of this. And I will do everything humanly and inhumanly possible to destroy my idea, like to find the crack. And I will, man, people don't understand because it's not just like 1 hour today, 1 hour tomorrow. No, it's it'll be over months. I will be trying to destroy one of my own ideas in the background of my mind for 4 years, 5 years, and beyond, still trying to break it and break it and break it. And I know other people don't do it that I do know people replay things and that, but they don't. I do it in a controlled manner. I don't just randomly try to break my thing. I come at different angles. I come at different
Yeah.
disciplines. I come at different lenses constantly. And so I know people are not doing that thorough of a check on their own ideas. I'm not saying they're not being thorough, but they're not doing it the same way I do it
Yeah.
on different levels, on different angles, on different perspectives of flipping it upside down. But I can say that what I just told you, I can say to someone I'm speaking with, and they'll just go, yeah, whatever. I do the same exact thing. And
I think
that's why we don't get anywhere.
and I think the way that you reveal that is by the types. I think you can sit there and ruminate and just attack your own ideas, and that works to an extent, which is I think what most people will do. But I don't think I think it's less I think the biggest way in which I've done that in my own life is to talk to other people, particularly those with differing beliefs, because it forces you to explain your idea in a way to somebody who's already skeptical. And in that way, the types of people you associate with and the range of people who you have conversations with, the depth of the conversations you have reveals the way in which you think about your own beliefs and the level of skepticism you have. And I think this is one of the different things where we talked about the idea of revealed versus stated preferences in a previous conversation. And this is one of those ways in which you can, when people might say that they are testing their own belief systems against themselves and trying to disprove themselves, that is a stated, that you can assume that is a stated belief. But the revealed behavior and is the conversations they are having and and the people they associate with and the information they come in contact with. So even if maybe it's not just conversations, but it's also perhaps the media you're consuming and the range of media you consume.
There's also another tell that I have noticed that makes it easy is okay. First of all, what you said is absolutely right. The quickest way to figure out or test something that you believe is to start talking to whoever most disagrees with that. Okay, that's a useful tool for anyone. If you strongly believe anything and you really want to know if that thing is true, then you should desire speaking to whoever absolutely thinks that is false. You should run to it. Nobody runs to it. I do. Nobody else does. Maybe you do. Maybe if you're one of the people watching this, you do too. But in general, people do not do that. Absolutely, they do not. And here's the tell part, because I didn't tell the tell. When you see someone who is encountering someone else and they hear what they have to say and they just lose it and get upset and get mad or have any type of negative reaction. Okay, fine, fair enough. But what happens when I test one of my own ideas with someone who has a different point of view and they point out where like they precisely pick a place where I'm wrong? Do I get upset? No, I do not. I personally get excited. I start smiling, not because I'm being performative, but because I'm like, oh my gosh, you have revealed. Gosh, I did not see that. I get so excited. It seems like, I don't think it seems like, I think it is like when people hear something that breaks whatever they had constructed, they get protective. They want to no, or they want to remove themselves from the situation. I don't ever feel like that. I tell people, and maybe they think I'm just like
Mm,
lip servicing, but I am drawn to that. I'm like, no, if you actually find a fault, you are going to become my new best friend, and I'm going to start asking you all kinds of questions. And now it sounds like I'm humble bragging or virtue signaling, but I'm not. This is just how I am. I want people to really explicitly explain why I'm wrong, and I can go, oh my gosh, because I always consider it a learning moment. And I think people think I just say this stuff like I don't actually believe it or live it, but I don't know how to be more honest.
yeah. It's curiosity and a dedication to, and I think that's really what it is. It's, and we, I think there's a reason that I think to an extent, I think confidence has to be at odds with curiosity. And I find it very, there's an interplay between the people that we listen to, the confidence they have in those things, and the curiosity they have for new opinions. And those, and I don't think that very often we hold curiosity as a virtue into itself, particularly at scale. And I I don't know what the mechanism is behind that, but it's something you observe very often, that, like you're saying, like when people see you smiling, when you have found a new way to interpret something that you have already believed, and they pointed out something you didn't see before. And now you're like, wow, this is like incredible. I have learned something today, and you get excited about that. Most people like meet that with such incredible skepticism. Like, there's no way. There's no way this guy actually is like, is he like making fun of me now? Or like, and people
Oh yeah,
uh,
that does happen too. Yes.
and so and people aren't, I don't know if they want to say wired or conditioned, or there's something in people that makes them see that and they're like immediate distrust. I don't know if there's some tribal thing going on. I'd have about that more, but maybe something
Yeah,
jumps out at
you
you,
could
right?
if you literally write that down, I can literally answer that for you offline for like 2. I have plenty to say about that, just not in the moment right now. But let me see
As he
real
says,
quick because I
safety.
actually,
I like that one.
yeah. And since I finally saw how to expand reading comments, she's asked me earlier, do I ever get to a point that I stop testing an idea, not enough instead is good enough? And I just- So eventually I will put something on the back burner because I have exhausted all avenues that I can possibly see. And then I'll let it sit there as a very highly probable, likely truth. And then I'll attend to matters on my mind. But I will never close it as like a law of nature or anything like that, because I will come back to it later periodically, or something will bring it back up in my mind and I will test it again. And I'll try to see if there's a new way. If I've picked up, I think of them as epistemic lenses of all the different ways I can look at something. And I pick up new epistemic lenses along the way. And so then I have to like take those and revisit old ideas. So that's how I handle that. But oh my gosh, there was something else I was just thinking with what you were just saying. What were you just saying again? Gina, a long bit. What was the path you were going down?
I was talking about how people distrust curiosity and genuine
Yes.
curiosity.
Yes. There's a bunch of things about my nature when I go mask off, so to speak, that really get misinterpreted in all the ways. I don't have time to go through like the whole list of things, but retroactively, I understand it. I know why signals get misread. And what usually happens, to put it extremely simply, more simple than it really is, someone, something, or express something that I find so rare that anyone would ever say that, think that, or come up with that. That this is me thinking in hindsight. My mask will come off. I will just start inquiring, asking questions with like no at all. And sometimes that goes great, but sometimes I guess the things that I say when I'm so open set off other like red flags in that person's mind for a multitude of reasons that are legitimate. And so, yeah, that makes it difficult because people, when I literally start smiling when I'm just like saying, "Oh my gosh, thank you. That is so incredible. Like I needed to know that. That like helps so much." And they'll think, "Okay, what is he doing?" They start thinking like, what's the game? What's the con? What's his angle? What is he actually trying to get?" And no matter how much I say no, genuinely, this is like profound. And they stage, man, this
Mm,
it's not right. So yeah, in short, I mean, it's so much more complicated than that, but I mean, in a nutshell, that all the time. And it
yeah.
agree about that.
Yeah, and I think Esty said that a little bit, and I think she talks about the idea of curiosity can lead people to places that they don't and want to go to. I think changing is psychologically threatening to people in some, and I think somebody who is prone to makes you seem like an unreliable ally, even if you're friends.
Yes. And ironically, it makes them think that you are the one who is easily swayed and you are the one who is easily taken by the wind and taken by whatever is trendy. Ironically, they see you as fickle, as someone who can just change with the wind, whereas they are like steadfast because they have grounded their roots and they take things
Mm,
slowly and seriously. They can't just hear some newfangled idea and go, "Oh my God, yes." And so they actually see you as the person who has like no stability in your thoughts. They think you're wishy-washy. And then it also makes them think that your words have even less effectiveness or standing because
yeah,
they're like, "Who are you? You're obviously grounded in nothing. Now
yeah.
I should really not listen to you because you're just going to change your mind tomorrow."
Yeah,
Oh,
that's it's ironic that the people who are convert. I think that curiosity leads you generally to the best ideas. Like over time, you're being willing to change your mind is a good thing, and seeking out ways to change your mind towards better ideas, good thing. As long as you have good discernment for the information that's coming in, and yet, ironically, that is met with so much distrust. And I think maybe evolutionarily, the tribal instinct was to just stick with your clan no matter what. And I think that if you can change your mind on this, on your opinion about, I don't know, throw out a contentious topic, abortion. If you can change your opinion about that, oh my God, like they could change their opinion about like their loyalty to me as a friend, or their loyalty to the country as a nationality, or like these other things.
yeah.
It
And
is this
again,
kind of
they see it as
slippery slope mentality that is very easy to fall into.
again, from their perspective, that is such a bug that you have. But then from your own perspective, potentially, it is such a feature. It is such a feature. And I would never want to give it up. I would never want to have a mind that is less flexible to new inputs. Now, again, everything has its extremes because there's always the person who's
Yes.
gullible who will just go along with anything they're told. That's not what I'm talking about
Yes.
at all.
Yeah, let's caveat that. Yeah.
Yes,
Discernment has to come
everything
into
has an
there.
extreme, but I like that I never get firmly planted. And by the way, SD, and even things that we know are more or less, it is what it is, like the constant that is the speed of light. I still look on my own for ways to circumvent that law of nature. Like I am constantly trying to come up with theoretical ideas of how can we make the speed of light not be a true constant. And I'm still failing, but it's my nature. I won't stop. I will still keep trying to, and something like AI to bounce things off, like, well, what if we have a train that's going at the speed of light and I'm on the train and I throw is that going to go
Yeah.
faster? Like I've already gone through all those. Actually, I went through all those questions before AI, but I was saying like, even though everything says the speed of light is fixed, I am still trying to find a way not even, and I'm just using that one example. I do that with a lot of classic problems that have been solved. And I am still, so I'm not just trying to break down my own ideas. I'm even trying to break down like these fundamental things that, like, whether it's theological or scientific or whatever, I still try to test the tenets that have stood like the test of time. I don't know. Maybe it's like a weird hobby, like how people do the daily crossword puzzle. That's my crossword puzzle, except I never win and I never get a single row ever. But that's the
Mm,
crossword puzzle I engage with on a regular.
yeah. And I think that there's a certain kind of like masochism involved with that pursuit, but it's like baked. Like it's not about the win. It's just about it's about the the process because I think it really stems from this idea that there is no matter what, you could always be wrong. Could be as like a 0.1% chance or a one like a 99% chance, but like you could always be wrong. And I think that just the knowledge of that drives some of us to just be so intense in our pursuit of ways in which we could be a little bit less wrong. Like I think that internalizing that very deeply means that you are hyper vigilant to ways in which that can be true because I am for myself, I don't enjoy the idea that I'm holding ideas that are inaccurate or that could be fixed. And I think part of that is why I pursue updating that information as much as possible.
Yeah. Earlier, I was talking about the theoretical infinite fractal of if you keep clustering into smaller and smaller groups, and if you go infinitely, when I was talking about measuring the coast of the British Isles, and if you keep using a tinier and tinier ruler and add the sum of all the lengths of the rulers, the actual number, the sum number will continue to grow without end, even though that's not comporting with reality. Well, what you just said is like the good version in my mind of that fractal, because that's how I see it. Like whatever my understanding of what I understand is measured with meter sticks that go all the way around whatever the perimeter circumference of my thought bubble is. And by this never ending trying to break it down, trying to find the fault, even if it's a small little mistake, I imagine I'm making those meter sticks smaller and smaller. So even though the totality of my knowledge is largely unchanged, at the extreme borders, there's infinite growth. If this makes sense, because I'm talking about something infinitely getting finer detail at the fringes, but not necessarily growing in overall scope or knowledge, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like this convergence, I suppose. Is that not quite what you're getting at?
No, explain what you mean by convergence.
I'm talking about like if you try to use like I always thought about it if just a squiggly shape, like not a circle, but like it was a smooth line, it's a closed shape. And you tried to use squares to approximate the area.
Oh yeah, yes,
If you
yes,
shrink the size of the squares like infinitely, eventually you will approach the size of the squiggle without ever actually hitting the
exactly.
right
That's
answer.
exactly yes, that's exactly what the British Isle example is exactly about. That's the exact same thing. And I guess I think about it, this idea of still constantly trying to refine my own ideas and beliefs, even if it's only a little bit of improvement. Again, just like how it's theoretical to hit the speed of light, like you could incrementally get closer to it theoretically,
Yeah.
but you'll never actually get to it. Or an example that's easier to imagine. If anyone's seen like the beginning of Top Gun Maverick and they're just trying to hit like Mach 10 or something fantastical for the first time. And, you know, eventually you can get to Mach 10, right? And you could even get a little bit past, but in engineering and in science and in physics, like just to go a little bit faster is going to take incredibly more fuel and force just to get a
Yeah.
little bit, just to get those little bitty bitty
Yeah.
little extra pieces. It's infinitely more force and power is required just to get that little bit further.
Yeah.
And that's the way I think about it of me refining my ideas. Like I'm never going to jump from Mach 10 to Mach 11. I'm just trying to get to Mach 2. So much work just to get that little fraction more, but that's what I am compelled to. And everyone's just like, why are you wasting your time just for that else? Like fly a kite.
Yeah.
And I say, well, if flying a kite will get me an extra 0.001, then I'll go fly a kite.
Yeah. And I think the difference between the proper discernment and just being gullible is that I think that the recognition is not that even if you don't look at discernment of information as a process, which is a large topic that would need several discussions to cover each individual facet, I think that it is rarer than people think that we just throw away knowledge and start over. Like the burden of just like of conspiracy theories, the burden of proof is so massive. You would be like standing atop a skyscraper and people are arguing over like how to erect the tower on top of the skyscraper. And you're like, no, tear it down. We're going back to the studs. We're going to build a new skyscraper. Like, I think it is so, while it occasionally happens where people walk back certain things, especially at the beginning of a field of knowledge when little is known about it in general. But I think it is much rarer than people realize to actually throw out existing information. It's much more often what you're describing as a refinement or a reinterpretation of the exact same information that was available before. It's very often, I can't think of many cases in which it's not this reinterpretation. And it's really just like, we're just going to ignore all of it. And like, Area 51 kind of like, it was all fake. The moon landing isn't real. Like, the skyscraper is an illusion. Like I
Yes,
don't.
everyone knows that me and Alan agree that all those things are hoaxes and fake.
Yes, yeah. And I think this.
It's a joke.
I haven't said I don't. So like just leave that little bit of doubt in the air. Maybe you can think I'm a conspiracy theorist, but in general, like I think that if given the choice between like starting a new theory by myself and refining an existing one, like I would bet that it is just a lot less. Like you would need so much more proof to make me throw away everything I know than to just adopt a completely new belief. And I think that's how you can admit.
Yeah. The thing that I never see get brought up, like, it's, even I have to go check in on the flat earthers every once in a while and see
Yeah.
what kind of memes they're generating and what kinds of conversations they're having. Yeah. Why, by the way? Not just for my own entertainment, because I want to legitimately see if anything they say is something I've never thought of. But anyway, the thing about it that, okay, if you ever delve into that kind of stuff, and you'll see all the classic arguments and all the things, and you'll see the classic counter examples, people who are not flat earthers who are talking to the flat earthers or whatever. And that's all fine. Okay, we've all seen that. But they never talk about all the other things, or they'll just speak on it in passing and move on. But they never talk about how not only do you need to rewrite gravity and redraw the entire system, which they do, but you would have to explain how ship navigation works. You would have to explain you would have to explain how GPS works on your phone, because it only works because of satellites that, like, everything is built upon the fact that this is actually a planet and things revolve around it. I mean, a sphere. And you don't realize how much you have to explain. You think you only need to explain gravity. You think you only need to explain why the sun comes up. No, that's just the beginning, because you'd have to explain how people go to navigation school and learn all this stuff about arcs and vectors and everything else, and explain how all jumbo still works.
Yeah.
If, in fact, the world is not a sphere. You have to explain a lot of things. You have to explain so much.
Yeah.
And you, what doesn't make any sense? Like, if you can observe orbs around you through telescopes that are literally rotating in space, why would you think you're not? Especially if you think you're not, again, you have to come up with all these other explanations. But if you simply accept that you're spinning, well, then you don't. But
Yeah, there's a much higher coherence. Like, and considering most of these things take decades, centuries to come up with, there's a lot of hubris in assuming that you could recreate all of the answers that using an alternate framework, you would need to recreate every answer that's been come up with in the last few hundred years. Like, there's a lot of arrogance assuming that you could do that at all.
And here's the key for anyone who sees this after the fact or right now. We're not just talking about a flat earth. This is everything. Now, play this game, everyone at home. Pretend that yes, we're talking about flat earth right now, but think about things that people are creating. Now, I want you to go out later onto your own Substack feed and look at everything that you can find where someone is explaining something, a new point of view of looking at something. And I don't care what it is. I don't care what it is. If it's a new way to draw with chalk, it's a new way to knit with wool. It could be spiritual. It could be something else. It could be like this new, I don't even care what it is. You just reinvented new kind of music. And whatever it is, try to pretend the thing that they have created is a flat earth model. This is the hard part. If you can't do what I'm saying, because I know some people will easily be able to do what I'm saying, but others will be like, what is he saying? Try to imagine that this is something that they obviously are building from scratch, and then imagine what already exists and how they are starting at the base level.
Yeah.
And they're starting essentially from scratch. And I'm only thinking about this because once or twice it's happened where someone DM'd me and were telling me that they had this whole new framework, like this whole radical take on philosophy been done before. And they're DMing me because they think that I may be tapping into that same new philosophy that they're working on. And they start presenting it, and they're basically telling me, see, like all these established things, they're not really true. You know, there's such another path. And I just like read it and okay. And they're like, not literally, but they're basically telling me, maybe you could join this cause and we can create this new philosophy together. And all I'm kind of thinking that I never say, but that all I'm thinking when I read these things is I have to recreate all of philosophy and discard what like what?
I don't have enough years in my life for that.
How am I going to do that? And to put it in terms that someone else might understand, it's like and create a new math, and you know how there's like binary and hexadecimal and all that. And create a new, completely different numbering system that is based on increments of pi.
Yeah.
And I'm going to recreate algebra. And they'd be like, do you want to join me in this endeavor? I'd be like, hell no, never, ever. And that's what it sounds like to me when someone's like, let's recreate philosophy. Like,
And
And
all these
that's how I think about
philosophers.
conspiracy theories. It's like, how can you?
And, I sometimes take a look at like really old mathematicians from like the 1800s, and I'm like, wow, it took me like 6 years to understand this thing that this like genius like figured out like by himself in his basement 200 years ago without ChatGPT. And here I am like struggling to like figure out this one equation. And like, man, oh man, like multiply that by 1,000. Like there is so much work. Like I would just rather just go take a nap at that point. And I'm like, and so what does the
Again,
implication of your new theory have on your workload going forward forever? And I think that that is particularly an affliction of the romantic people, like the romantics out there. And I think it's really awesome to think that you alone in your infinite wisdom can come up with something that supplants the norm. And like, what a great story that is. That's like a real main character energy, but man, oh man, is that just like not pragmatic?
again, the irony though is if someone was watching this out of context, not from your audience, have no idea who you are, just a random passerby, and they like hear you say what you just said, they go, wow, that guy is really stuck in his own world. Wow, he has blinders on. Like he doesn't
Yeah.
realize like all these amazing innovations that people are coming up with. And he's just trying to squelch like their curiosity and their discovery of knowledge. Like who is
Yeah.
he, this guy, Alan? Who like, and he just accepts the party line. He's just with mainstream science. Sorry. I don't mean to caricature anyone. Hopefully
No,
that
but
shoe
that
doesn't fit
is
anyone that I just acted out.
I think that's going to be the discussion that is the counter argument. But my challenge to people
My
who
SC.
say that is yes, yes. Thank you for sticking around. Actually, yeah, I know we're coming in on 2 hours here, but like, yeah, I would say my maybe just as like a couple of parting thoughts. Then is like I would say that my challenge to people who would levy that at myself or yourself who's like you are just sticking with the party line is I will change my opinion 100%. I would just like for you to come up with answers to all of the questions that have already been answered over the last 300 years. Submit that as like a thick ass book to me. If I and once and I will read it. I will read your book. And if you have sufficiently answered all those questions, then yeah, sure. Like I will 100% change. But like the amount of work you would do is so astronomical. Like I just go ahead, invite you. But like, know that my standards are, and that's probably a good thing.
Yeah. And so, yeah, to try to wind things down, because I know eventually we all have to eat and use the facilities. But
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I hate when I take those asides and throw myself off. Say what you're saying again, and it'll come back to me in 10 seconds.
I was just saying, like, I would say that yeah, people can 100% levy the accusation that we're just mainstream, like siding with mainstream science and not part of the counterculture. I'm like,
Yeah. So this is
that's not at all
why,
like the case. It's not a side.
this is why, yeah, the reason I don't try to create my whole brand new take on philosophy or anything else. I mean, you already said the reason I don't do that, but the reason I do what I do, because instead, rather than towing some kind of party line or mainstream accepted science, what I try to do is to try to see the connections between existing disciplines that are already established. And
Mm,
I try to look for the connections between them that have not been pointed out yet. That's actually what I try to do because that feels more worthwhile to me because I'm not necessarily disproving anything. I am potentially generating something new
yeah.
based on what something that came before and was established. And just to sort of weirdly try to close things out, okay, I'm not doing this for me, and I'm barely doing this for Alan, but for anyone else who's just like, when will this end? You know, when I first, okay, because more inflation, I just put it together as one big one, and it's out on. Now you got me thinking about it. Related.
Yeah. How do we say it?
No, I think I knew how to say it, but then now you got me to like question myself. See, it works. Anyway, so according to Panagram, it's like 100% made from AI. Not even AI assisted, not even human involvement. Okay, fine, fine. But here's the thing. And I know discussion how Panagram works because it doesn't actually do what you think it does. And they don't advertise that it does what you think it does. But what people, they advertise they do is they don't connect. Fine. That's a conversation for another day. But here's the thing. When I first wrote the first version of moral inflation and all the parts, I was like, or actually, I should say, when I first made the draft for the whole thing, I was like, am I just like making up something that there's already like reams of evidence and I think I have a great idea, but because a lot of times ideas that come to me, by the way, that was the Amazon person waving at me. Anyway, a lot of times I come up with an essay and I look and then I see, oh, Descartes, that's what he wrote about for like 80 years. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Cause I didn't know that, even though I just wrote the thing. And I had another one recently where I found out that I discovered what Copernicus discovered hundreds of years ago. And I was like, oh, that's why Copernicus was so famous and initially hated. And I was like, and I just came up with that on accident. Okay, Jen, you sound like humble brags, but that's not the point. So moral inflation, I did the same kind of check. Has this already been done? Has this already been said? And I checked and checked. And and I went to all the ways of searching you can search. And as far as I could tell, no one, there's plenty of writing on separate parts of the moral inflation essay as a whole. Yes, of course, there's plenty of disparate parts of it. But I searched so hard and no one who had published that has been seen wide enough connected the dots the way I did. Not a single person, not a single person did. And so now I think about this irony of Panagram, which again is not measuring what you think it's measuring, but it says it's 100% AI. And if we understand it the way humans think what that means, then that's profound because either if it is 100% AI generated, AI has literally come up with a new legitimate theory that no human has ever thought of. So that's either a huge kudos for AI because this is an AI something and took somebody else's idea and presented it because it exists. So where did it get it from? So either the AI is like evolving and becoming as smart as a human, or it's a person who had the idea that's never been written before ever. So, and not to change the topic into AI slop and stuff, and you go, stop appropriating other people's ideas and art and repurposing them for yourself. Okay, that's fine. But where's the slop if what I created you cannot find anywhere else? It does not exist.
And I think that's how we overcome all these, like we were saying with moral inflation, creates these tribal communities of people who are unwilling to accept different points of view. And I think what you're saying here is playing into that a lot because what in reality, what we're trying to do is rather than establishing a way in which one person's reality is true and one person's reality is not, I think that there are equal claims to reality on both perspectives. And being able to accept two things as true, two bodies of evidence that both can exist, and then drawing a new connection between them, rather than is exactly what you're doing when you think of new ideas and reconnect new ideas, rather than throwing like what I think a lot of the tribalism is exactly what we're saying with like flat earthers. I'm going to say, like, I'm going to make a very bold statement that the left versus right debate is identical to the flat earth versus circular spherical earth debate. That's an adorable little dog there. And the idea that they are wrong and I'm going to throw away all of the observations that they have made without wholesale and without providing alternate answers is just as damning as the flat earthers who throw away all of the observations made by people who believe the earth is spherical. And I think that what we are doing when we connect two bodies of existing evidence with without throwing away either one is acknowledging the work that went in and the observations that were made, while also saying, contributing some new bit of knowledge that says, hey, here are two things that are both established. I'm not going to throw away either because man, oh man, is that a lot of work. But I am going to say yes and then connect those two with a way something that has not been constructed before. And I think that is the that is the most generous way. I don't see that as a threat, and I think a lot of people do. I think people see it as a threat to acknowledge the party that opposes them, but I think it is actually the most peaceful way in which you can go about talking about things, because you can acknowledge both things at the same time while contributing new ideas without having to throw away much of anything, and saying like, okay, these are I I think there's a practical way in which an individual can go about contributing new knowledge without overloading the burden of proof, and also being respectful of the people who believe the things that they believe. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. All right, after party at the pub,
And
everyone. We'll be
all right,
there.
after party at the pub, guys.
I'm doing this as a kindness
Great.
to the guests because I could keep talking. You know,
Yeah.
I
Because
I have
nobody
power
respects
banks
me,
for
but we do
days.
respect the guests.
Yes, yes.
No, I
You know,
appreciate it, everybody. We came with I made some really cool stuff out today. I love this. I love this. I'm just
yeah.
really,
I didn't mean to be mobile. This was not the way I planned this, but
oh yeah.
life happens. Apparently, none of these contractors got my Substack itinerary or had any idea that I had Substack commitments. So, I got to work on that. I got to talk to my secretary.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, thanks everybody. I will be posting this on YouTube and as well as on Substack, and everybody subscribe to both Eric and Rutilated, and all the links will be in all of the descriptions. But yeah, I'll put some up for that as well. And thanks again. See you.